A German shepherd, hungry and thirsty, finds a baby in a box. What will it do next? No one knows where it came from. No name, no collar, no one waiting for it to come home. Yet, on a freezing, stormy night, it was the only creature that stopped when it heard a faint whimper from an old box by the woods. A dog once abandoned by the world, choosing not to turn its back on a tiny life smaller than itself. No one witnessed it, but by morning, the whole town stood in silence. This is not just a story about loyalty, it's a question. Can the instinct to love be stronger than the memory of betrayal? If you believe that sometimes miracles come from those forgotten, stay with us at Dog Stories. And don't forget to subscribe to support us. We truly appreciate your support. And this is where it all began. The wind swept down from the Cascade Mountains, whipping up dry branches on the cold, barren dirt road leading into Alder Creek Forest. The sky was a dull gray, with low-hanging clouds pressing down on the small town, plunging it into darkness earlier than usual. Rain began to pour in waves, the wind howling through the spindly trees. There was no one out there. No one was foolish or reckless enough to venture out in this weather. Except for one creature. By a thicket next to a seldom-traveled trail, a gaunt German shepherd silently moved forward, its nose brushing the ground. Its fur, once thick and shiny, was now matted in patches from the mud, caked with debris, and soaked by the cold rain. A long scar ran from its hip to its left hind leg, making it limp noticeably, but it kept moving. Starving, each step was a struggle. Yet something in the night had stirred it. A sound, a smell, something was wrong. The dog stopped when the wind carried a strange scent. Damp wood, wet fabric, and a human. It slowly walked toward a fallen tree, where an old, waterlogged cardboard box was loosely tied with a piece of frayed cloth. At first, the dog just stood there, tilting its head, ears perked. And then, a sound so faint it was almost indistinguishable from the rain, a soft whimper, like that of a creature left behind. There was no one else, just it. Without hesitation, the dog approached, its nose touching the box. A small noise came from inside. Using its claws and teeth, it gently scratched at the lid, pulling away the thin cloth covering the top. Inside was a newborn baby girl, tightly wrapped in a soaked blanket, her skin pale from the cold. The baby barely moved, only gasping for breath. There was no scent of milk, no sign that anyone would be coming back. The dog looked around one last time. The rain was still pouring, the wind biting through the skin, but it didn't leave. It curled up, pressing its body against the cardboard box, using its wet fur and fragile body heat to shield the baby from the wind. It whimpered softly, but didn't give up. When the rain pounded against its back, it stayed still. When lightning tore across the sky, it only flinched slightly before tightening its position again. The night was long, cold, and no one came. Sometimes it would whimper softly, as if trying to wake the baby. Other times, it would turn its head toward the road, where car headlights would occasionally pass in the distance, only to disappear into the darkness. No one stopped. A skinny dog lying next to an old box in the woods. To the outside world, that was something people would rather avoid. But Ranger didn't leave. Not because anyone taught it to do so. Not because it had been trained to protect others. Not for a reward. Simply because of instinct. An instinct that the modern world had forgotten. Not to let any life die alone. Its body shivered with the cold, but it stayed still. Only its ears occasionally twitched at sounds in the forest, as if waiting for a sign, a miracle, someone to care enough to stop. The baby stirred for the first time in hours. A fragile whimper echoed. Ranger leaned forward and gently licked the baby's forehead. Then it lay back down, eyes wide open, alert like a sentry. In the darkness of the night, unseen by anyone, an unnamed dog and an unnamed child had become everything to each other. The rain continued to fall. Not as heavy as it had been in the middle of the night, but still enough to wash away any traces on the ground. Cold droplets gathered into small streams, winding their way through the dry branches scattered along the trail through Alder Creek Forest. A muddy patch showed fresh claw marks, but no one saw, until Jesse walked into the scene. The 14-year-old boy walked briskly along the path, carrying an old backpack over his shoulder and wearing a Bluetooth earbud in one ear. The music played softly, but he wasn't really listening. His mind was busy cursing everything. Unfinished homework, his mom's new no screens for a week rule, and, oh, this morning's punishment. Go into the woods to gather firewood. Learn what cold and responsibility feel like. Jesse didn't know what responsibility meant, but he sure knew what cold felt like. And bored. He kicked a rotten log lightly, muttering something under his breath, then stopped to adjust his earbud. At that moment, a faint noise cut through the patter of rain. Jesse squinted. He pulled the earbud out and looked up. There was no one else. Jesse was about to keep walking when he heard it more clearly. A hoarse sound, mixed with a breath. Not the sound of a wild animal, not the snap of a broken branch. It was alive. Jesse tightened the strap of his backpack and turned toward the noise. Just a few steps and he froze. Beneath a fallen tree, among the decaying leaves and debris blown in by the wind, was an image that made him stiffen. A large German shepherd, its fur soaked, curled around a waterlogged cardboard box. Its body shuddered in waves. Its tired eyes barely opened, the gaze not aggressive, just quiet, standing guard. Jesse didn't know what to do. He took a step back, but then something inside the box stirred. A high-pitched, faint sound, chilling to the bone. The cry of a newborn. All of his instincts for self-protection, suspicion, and fear melted away. Jesse rushed forward, kneeling beside the box, trying not to touch the dog. It just stared at him, not growling, not leaving. He trembled as he pushed the wet cloth off the top of the box. And just as he feared, there was a newborn, curled up, its face purple from the cold, lips pressed tight, eyes shut tight. Oh my God. Jesse pulled out his phone, his hand so wet that the screen wouldn't register his touch. He wiped it on his shirt, then opened it again, searching for the number 911. As he waited for the call to connect, he looked at the dog. You've been here all night, huh? No one answered. But those eyes, never leaving the baby, spoke for everything. Jesse gave a near-accurate location. East edge of Alder Creek Forest, near the old gas station, about a mile from the main road. There's a newborn in a box. And a dog. It's not aggressive, it's keeping the baby warm. It's real. It's urgent. He spoke like he was afraid they wouldn't believe him, but the voice on the other end only instructed, stay there. Don't try to move the baby. Keep the line open. Jesse sat down, not daring to touch anything else. The rain continued to fall. The baby wasn't crying anymore, only breathing softly. Jesse took off his jacket and gently draped it over the top of the box. The dog glanced at him, then pressed itself closer to the side of the box, as if sharing every last breath. About 15 minutes later, red lights flashed from the main road. The sound of a siren grew louder, then faded as it neared. Jesse jumped up, waving his arms. Over here! 3 paramedics rushed forward. One knelt down to check the baby, while another approached the dog. Easy, buddy, he whispered, his hand cautiously extended. But the dog didn't resist. It only whimpered softly as it was lifted, its eyes still fixed on the box until the very end. Did you call? One of the paramedics asked Jesse. He nodded. The dog has been here all night with the baby. It kept her warm. A tall man froze in the rain, staring at Jesse. Are you sure? I'm sure. The scene left the adults in stunned silence. One of them whispered, if it weren't for it, the baby probably would have. No one said anything more. As the ambulance started up, carrying the newborn wrapped in a blanket and the exhausted dog, Jesse stood in the rain for the first time in his life, not feeling useless. The nurse placed the tiny ID bracelet around the girl's wrist in the ICU, a small piece of paper hastily written, Willa, Jane Doe. They didn't know the baby's real name. No one knew anything. The only information they had was that she had been found in an old cardboard box in the woods during a storm, still alive, thanks to an unknown dog. Willa hadn't opened her eyes yet. Her breathing was weak but stable. The medical team said that if they had been half an hour later, her chances of survival would have been 0. Newborns don't have body fat to protect them. The cold out in the woods is enough to kill an adult, one doctor murmured. But there was something strange. The baby's body temperature hadn't dropped to the dangerously low level they usually saw. There had to be some factor keeping her warm. They exchanged looks. They all knew. It was the dog. Meanwhile, at the county veterinary clinic, the German shepherd was being warmed up and receiving an IV. Both exhausted and severely dehydrated, it remained alert, its eyes always fixed on the door whenever someone walked in, as if waiting for something. We'll call it Ranger, the vet said, gently stroking its back. Like a sentry. Ranger didn't bark, didn't growl, it was silent. Apart from the environmental wounds, the vet discovered something even more surprising. An old microchip buried deep near its left shoulder blade, the kind used in canine units. The technician scanned the ID number. The screen flickered for a few seconds, then displayed the message, Canine unit status deactivated, file closed in 2020. The records revealed that Ranger had been trained in search and rescue operations in Nevada. Its former name was Echo. It had belonged to a rescue unit that worked alongside firefighters, participating in missions to find missing persons after natural disasters. That was until it was injured in a landslide, a wound that stretched from its hip to its hind leg, matching the scar it now bore. After that, the records noted briefly, no longer fit for service, discharged, transferred. No one knew where it had gone since then. Maybe someone adopted it and then abandoned it, the vet muttered. Or worse. Jesse sat frozen as he listened to this. He sat in the waiting room, his eyes fixed on the glass door. Ranger was lying in a warm kennel, its head resting on its front paws, its gaze never leaving the door. Jesse whispered to himself, it used to save people and then was left like this. At the same time, the story began to spread. A medical worker had taken a picture of Ranger lying beside the box, its alert eyes scanning the rain. The photo was shared online with a simple caption, "Not everyone is born a hero, but some souls, even when abandoned by the world, still choose to save others." The internet exploded. From dog lovers to various groups sharing the heartwarming story, thousands of shares flooded in within just a few hours. Local news outlets began reaching out to the hospital. A reporter knocked on the door of the veterinary center. They didn't just want to know about the miraculous baby, but also about the dog that had protected her from death. At the hospital, Willa began to respond to sound. She moved slightly at the sound of whispers. The doctor said it was a sign of recovery, but Jesse believed it was something else. He asked the nurse if he could get closer. He pulled out his phone, opening a short recording of Ranger's breath and the faint scratching sounds from that night, the sounds he had recorded while waiting for the ambulance. Willa gently tilted her head to one side, her lips parted. Jesse bit his lip, moved. "It was the first one to keep you alive," he whispered, "and you still recognize its voice." From that point on, the story was no longer just news. It became a small-town legend. A dog once trained to save lives, wounded and abandoned, had once again risked everything to protect the smallest life. No one taught it. No one gave orders. Ranger just did the right thing. And now, the whole town was beginning to learn from that. 2 days after Willa was moved to the ICU, Jesse returned to the veterinary clinic with a paper bag full of homemade cookies and a bag of beef jerky. He didn't know what the dog could eat, but he brought them anyway, as a way of saying, "I miss you." Ranger was still lying still in the heated kennel, its eyes wide open as it heard footsteps. Jesse sat down in front of the metal bars, saying nothing at first. Inside was a creature that seemed shattered both physically and mentally, and yet it had chosen to embrace a stranger's life in the cold of the night to keep it alive. "They said you were once K9, Jesse spoke after a few minutes of silence. "You used to save people for a living, then got hurt, and then forgotten." Ranger tilted its head, not because it understood the words, but because of the tone. Something in Jesse's voice was no longer the same as before. He looked down at his hand, a small scar from an old bike accident still visible. "Back then, whenever someone mentioned homework or responsibility, I'd find a way to avoid it. I felt like I didn't matter to anyone. But you didn't need anyone to recognize you, and you still did the right thing. You didn't need a reason." Ranger blinked, resting its chin on its paw. Jesse gave a faint smile. "My mom used to say, taking responsibility is what turns a kid into an adult." Maybe she was right. He pulled out his phone, scrolling to the picture taken when he sat by Willa and Ranger in the rain, before the ambulance arrived. The picture was blurry, but clear enough to show how Ranger lay over the box, as if keeping a part of its heart in it. That night, Jesse went home and told his mom something he had never said before. "I want to go back to school. I want to take my studies seriously." She looked at him, surprised. "Why?" Jesse didn't hesitate. "Because there are things worth becoming someone who can make a difference." From that day on, Jesse began to change. He woke up early, He made breakfast for himself. He asked his mom if she needed any help. At first, everyone thought it was a joke, but day by day, he kept up the routine. At the hospital, Willa started feeding from the bottle better, responding to light and sounds. She still hadn't had any relatives come to claim her. Every afternoon, Jessie would ask to sit by her, talking to her as though they had known each other in a past life. "You know," Jessie whispered one evening as the room bathed in soft yellow light, "I think you and Ranger have something in common. Both of you have no one but still choose to keep someone else alive instead of just enduring alone." At the same time, the vet called Jessie's mom. "Ranger is recovering pretty well, but it seems like your son is better at providing emotional support than we are." They allowed Jessie to take Ranger for walks in the backyard of the clinic. In the beginning, Ranger was slow, but before long, it started walking faster, its tail wagging lightly every time it saw Jessie. "We're alike, you know?" Jessie said one afternoon as the two of them sat under the porch, sheltering from the light rain. "I used to think I was abandoned. You actually were. But we both still have value. Someone just needs to see it." One day, as Jessie carefully cleaned Ranger's old wound under the supervision of the vet, he asked, "Why did they take it out of the unit? It's still alive." "In a K9 unit, a dog that's injured or has slower reflexes can no longer serve," the vet replied. "That's the rule. They need dogs that react precisely every second. And what if it still wants to save people?" "The rule doesn't ask that." Jessie nodded, his gaze darkening. "Then I guess I won't follow the rule. I choose to follow Ranger." That night, Jessie wrote an email to the town mayor and the local TV station. In the email, he attached pictures, notes about Ranger's past training, and ended with one line: "If a dog that was abandoned still chooses to save a baby, then this town should not turn its back again." Less than 24 hours later, the town of Alder Creek spread the letter like a declaration of compassion. Journalists came to interview Jessie. A news segment that evening quoted, "The boy once thought to have no future, along with an abandoned dog, has rewritten the definition of the instinct to save lives." Their story was no longer just breaking news. It had become living proof of a simple but forgotten truth, that sometimes those who have been forgotten are the ones who save what's most precious. The sky remained overcast all afternoon. Thick gray clouds hung low over the roof of Douglas County Hospital, as if holding back a storm that hadn't fully passed. In the neonatal intensive care unit, the soft hum of the ventilator blended with the artificial heartbeat, creating a rhythm that made one think everything had found its safe course. Willa lay there, tiny, still wrapped in the soft light blue blanket, her face now rosier, occasionally stirring at the sound of movement. The nurses began talking about moving her to a regular nursery in the next few days. "A miraculous survival," the doctor said. But it was in those moments when people let their guard down that fate began to challenge again. It was nearly 2 a.m. The entire hospital was silent. The hallway lights were dim, and no one noticed the German shepherd lying in the temporary medical check-in kennel at the back wing. Ranger had been allowed to sleep at the center beside the hospital during its recovery, under the supervision of the vet and rescue personnel. Jessie had gone home early, but before he left, he whispered in Ranger's ear, "I'm leaving the baby for you to watch over." No one thought those words would turn out to be true. 2:08 a.m. Ranger sprang up. There was no clear noise, no obvious sign that anyone could detect, but it knew, a vibration in the air, a frequency that no one else could hear. It let out a soft growl, its ears standing upright, then began to howl, short, sharp, and irregular. The howl echoed through the two wings, reaching the nurses' station. At first they thought it was having a nightmare, but the howling didn't stop. An elderly security guard stepped out, frowning. "It's never done this before," he said, then turned toward the veterinary area. Ranger scratched at the cage, its eyes frantic, howling so loudly that the other animals started barking along. The security guard felt something wasn't right. He opened the kennel. All right, what do you want?" The dog bolted down the hallway, running like mad toward the door leading to the neonatal wing. The guard followed, his heart pounding in his chest. When they arrived, a loud, piercing beep rang from the NICU monitor. The door swung open. Two nurses rushed to Willa's side. The baby was turning blue, Her lips were tinged gray. Her eyes were tightly shut. One of the nurses screamed, "She's stopped breathing. Get the on-call doctor." Ranger didn't enter the room. It just stood outside the door, head stretched forward, letting out one more short howl before falling silent. Moments later, the doctor rushed in and began performing resuscitation. One nurse squeezed the bag, while another called for an internal emergency. In less than 2 minutes, Willa started breathing again. The monitor's readings began to stabilize. The baby was switched to emergency oxygen. The group of adults stood frozen, sweat pouring down like they had just run a lap around a stadium. The doctor whispered, "If we'd been 3 minutes later." It was then that everyone noticed the hallway. Ranger was still standing there, silent, as though it had just completed a mission and was waiting for confirmation. No one said anything for a few seconds. A young nurse turned to the security guard. "How did it know?" He shook his head. "I don't know, but clearly, it knew." The next morning, when Jesse received the call from the hospital, he didn't say anything for the first few seconds. Then, he let out a quiet breath, as if something within him had been reinforced once again. "Can I come right now?" he asked. When Jesse arrived, Ranger immediately charged down the hallway, its tail wagging furiously. Jesse hugged its neck. "You did it, didn't you? I knew you wouldn't abandon her." In Willa's room, the doctors were still discussing the situation. They reviewed the security footage. No one touched the equipment. No one heard any crying. All the readings beforehand had been completely normal. But Ranger, the abandoned dog, thought to have lost all its service functions, was the first being to detect a baby on the brink of life and death. The news spread in just one afternoon. Local newspapers published stories one after another. German Shepherd alerts and saves baby girl for the second time. Doctors confirm intervention time was impossible to be later. Jesse read the article, then quietly closed his phone. He didn't need the news to believe in Ranger, but the whole world should know, because amidst modern technology and the indifferent ears of humans, it was a heart once abandoned that chose to listen again. The early spring sunlight streamed through the small kitchen window in Jesse's house. Dust particles floated in the air, moving with the soft laughter coming from the high chair in the middle of the room. Willa, now 4 months old, reached out for the yellow plastic spoon that Jesse held. She was healthy now, her eyes bright and lively, her hair starting to grow in soft patches, as fine as silk. Beneath the chair, curled up at Jesse's feet, lay Ranger. Its head rested on the chair's leg, eyes half closed, breathing steady. But at the slightest stir or soft cry from Willa, those ears would stand up immediately. Jesse's mom stood by the sink, glancing at the 2 little ones of her son, then looking back at Jesse. He was carefully spooning baby food for Willa, humming something indistinct under his breath. She had never seen her son so patient. Never seen him commit to something so fully. Until this little girl, and that dog. A few weeks after the night Ranger saved Willa for the second time, the hospital made an announcement. No one had come forward to claim her. No calls. No new information. Willa officially became a case without a name, under the temporary care of the state. Jesse didn't hesitate. He went home, printed the forms from the Child Welfare Agency's website, placed them on the kitchen table, and told his mom, "I don't want to be apart from her. I know you have to sign on my behalf, but if you agree, we'll be her family." His mom stared at the paper, silent for a moment. Then she picked up the pen. No questions asked. One late afternoon in early March, Jesse, 14 years old, an 8th grader, officially became the temporary legal guardian of a nameless baby girl and a dog once discarded from the K-9 unit. The story was simply titled The Unlikely Three. The media continued to follow them, but no longer with shock headlines. Now people came to hear about the little moments, Ranger lying in the yard while Willa practiced rolling over, Jesse learning how to change diapers, make bottles, a boy once labeled useless, now setting his alarm for 5 a.m. to wake up and feed her before heading to school. The neighbors started greeting Jesse every morning. The stay-at-home moms in the neighborhood brought over gifts, diapers, toys, and even a hand-me-down stroller. A retired firefighter came to the door, shook Jesse's hand, and said, "You and that dog, you've made me believe in this world again." Ranger seemed to have found its true purpose. It was no longer confused, no longer howling in its sleep. It had a job, to guard Willa. Wherever the baby went, Ranger followed. When she slept, it stood watch. When she laughed, it wagged its tail. When she cried, it licked her hand until she stopped. One night, Willa cried non-stop. Jesse, exhausted, sat down on the floor, his hands covering his head. "I don't know what to do anymore," he mumbled. Ranger walked over, doing nothing but sitting beside him, resting its head on his shoulder. No words were needed. It was just there. And that was enough. The next morning, Jesse said to his mom, "I think Ranger is helping raise her too." His mom smiled. "Well, I guess now we have 3 people raising her. A boy, a dog, and a mom learning how to be a mom again." When the Child Welfare Agency conducted a routine check, the social worker took less than an hour to make a note in the file. The bond between the child and the temporary family exceeds expectations. The nurturing environment is stable. Recommend continued support working toward official adoption. They didn't share a common last name. No one shared the same bloodline. But in the house at the end of the street, with its soft yellow walls and a front yard full of daisies, there were 3 beings once labeled unwanted, now creating something no one expected, a true family. Summer arrived with the annual festival in the town square of Alder Creek. Everywhere was bursting with color, flags glittering high on their strings, country music softly playing from public speakers, and the scent of freshly baked apple pies mingling with the smell of grilled meats in the air. Stalls from schools, rescue stations, and volunteer groups stretched along both sides of the street. But in the center of the square, drawing the attention of everyone, stood a small wooden stage where individuals from the community were being honored. Ranger stood there, wearing a red bandana with the words "Hero" twice over, embroidered in white. Jessie held Willa's hand, now walking, her hair thicker and tied back with a small blue ribbon. The little girl chattered nonstop, her other hand clutching a small fabric toy shaped like a dog. When it was their turn to step onto the stage, the entire square fell silent. The host's voice trembled. "We honor a creature once abandoned, once removed from duty, but who saved a baby twice, and reminded us 3 times that the instinct to love doesn't need to be trained." Jessie stepped forward. No speech, no papers, just a steady gaze. "People call us the unlikely 3, Jessie began. "But I think the unexpected part isn't that the 3 of us are together. It's that a dog who was abandoned, a baby no one claimed, and a kid once labeled useless could create something good." No one clapped immediately. The crowd stood still, many wiping away tears. Then the first clap rang out, followed by the rest of the square. Willa waved her hand, clearly saying each word, "Puppy, my hero." Ranger looked up, then quietly moved closer, sitting down beside her, resting its head gently on Jessie's lap. People pulled out their phones to capture the moment. There was something in the way the afternoon light filtered through Willa's thin blonde hair that made the scene feel like a frame from a movie. But this wasn't a movie. This was real. After the ceremony, Jessie, his mom, Willa, and Ranger returned to their small house at the end of the street. On the dining table were 3 pieces of cake and a small slice set aside in a porcelain dish for Ranger. Willa took a spoonful and fed the dog a small bite. "Is it good?" Ranger licked the spoon, then nudged its head into the little girl's belly. The whole family laughed. The following week, Jessie received the official news. The adoption request for Willa had been approved. Along with that, the town decided to honor Ranger as Animal Guardian of the Year, the highest recognition for an animal in the community. A wooden plaque was placed in front of the rescue center, engraved with the words, "Sometimes, what the world abandons is what will save the very best part of us." The story of Ranger, Jessie, and Willa. Months later, Jesse posted a simple message on his personal social media, with no photos, no hashtags, no desire for it to go viral. Just one heartfelt line: "I didn't choose to be a hero. I just chose not to leave behind what I love." As for Ranger, it did that before I even knew what love was. The post quietly spread. No noise, but it traveled far. On an ordinary Sunday morning, Willa sat on the rug playing with a wooden block. Ranger lay beside her, eyes closed, ears still perked, guarding every sound. Jesse watched them both from the kitchen window, holding his first cup of coffee for the day. No glory, no medals, just quiet peace and a family that had found each other. Not because of blood, but because of one cold night, one box, one faint cry, and one dog that refused to turn away. Sometimes the smallest things are the ones that redefine an entire life. Some stories don't need to end with applause or praise because the journey itself is the greatest reward. The story of Ranger, Jesse, and Willa is not a magical miracle, but a clear testament that love, loyalty, and the instinct to protect don't lie in grand gestures, but in quiet, steadfast choices. A dog once abandoned, a baby no one claimed, a teenage boy once underestimated. No one thought these three lives would create something memorable, until they found each other. And then, through rainy nights, weak breaths, and seemingly ordinary moments, they taught an entire community that family is not just where you're born, but where you are chosen to stay. That is the lesson Ranger left behind. That you don't need to be perfect, you don't need to be recognized, you don't need a glorious past, you only need a heart that refuses to let go of what it believes is right. And perhaps, in a world that is sometimes too busy to listen, it is these seemingly invisible creatures that speak the loudest about love and hope. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the Dog Stories channel so you won't miss out on more heartfelt and genuine journeys like this one. We truly appreciate your support. Let the stories of loyalty, of love for animals, and of souls seemingly forgotten by the world be heard, spread, and live on. Thank you for listening. And don't forget, there are heroes who don't need capes, just a heart and four legs.